what are the things I want my audience to take away? What's the theme? What's the message? I think about that thesis statement. I actually write it down, and then I make sure everything that I do going forward, whether that's writing out the speech, creating an outline, creating stories, or even thinking of quotes, I refer everything back to that thesis statement. Here are my 6 steps on how I prepare for each and every presentation. So over the last year, I've had the opportunity to speak for universities, high schools, nonprofits, and corporations alike. Here are my 6 steps on how I prepare for each and every presentation. So the first thing I do is to Thinkitate on an opening story that will captivate my audience. So what in the heck do I mean by Thinkitate? Thinkitate is a term I learned from Tom Bilyeu, in which he thinks and meditates on a subject or idea or thought. So before I begin any presentation, I like to sit, meditate, and also actively think about an opening story that will be very appealing and captivating to my audience. So I recently had a presentation for a university trio program in which I thought about an opening story, including my grandmother, and how she really didn't believe that I could go off to a university out of town, stay, and finish. I thought of this story, and I used this story to talk about how you can respond to your environment and how you can overcome difficult situations. The second thing I do is establish credibility. And a lot of times when you think about establishing credibility, I may say, hey, I've worked with this company or I've done these accomplishments. But for me, I like to tailor my credibility to the audience I'm speaking to. So again, to use this university trio example, I established my credibility by being relatable. I talked about the sneakers I had on. I might have threw in a no cap slang, right? I did those little things to make myself feel more approachable and more relatable. So when I tell them my story and where I came from, they feel that they could do it too. The third thing I do is to create a mental thesis statement. I take it back to college. I'm like, okay, hey, what are the things I want my audience to take away? What's the theme? What's the message? I think about that thesis statement. I actually write it down, and then I make sure everything that I do going forward, whether that's writing out the speech, creating an outline, creating stories, or even thinking of quotes, I refer everything back to that thesis statement. I make sure that my thesis statement has some type of buzzword. So to take it back to the trio program example, in that speech, I talked about you are a product of how you respond to your environment. So that thesis statement, I kept referring back to that in everything that I did within the speech. The fourth thing that I do is to create an outline. So, little fun fact, a lot of times with my outlines, I'll actually use AI. I'll go on ChatGPT and type in what's an outline for a presentation to college students, or what's an outline for this or that or X, Y, and Z. And it'll help me develop an outline that I can then tweak and write about. But in the trio example, my outline were the 5 key takeaways that I wanted the audience to have. So then I had my thesis statement, and then I built my 5 outline points to match that thesis statement. So after I have my thesis statement and I write my outline, which can also be the audience takeaways, the fifth thing that I do is to write the speech out verbatim. When I say I have 5, 6, 7, 10,000 words, I literally write the speech out verbatim. That's because I want to intimately know my speech. I want to know what's coming next. I want to know the transitions. Pro tip, know the transitions. And when I get on stage, I don't bring a piece of paper. I don't care about reciting it perfectly verbatim because the audience doesn't know what I wrote. However, I need to know it internally. I need to know every punchline. I need to know every hit, every transition. And for me, the way that I found to do that best is to write the speech out verbatim. So after I write my speech out verbatim, the fifth and final thing I do is to practice, and then practice some more. So whether that's me reciting the speech in the mirror or me in my office with the door closed by myself, saying it aloud to invisible people, it's all about practicing your speech, understanding how things flow, hearing it audibly to yourself. It's all about getting familiar, building that muscle memory with your speech so you know that on the day of the presentation, you're properly prepared, and that's not the first time that you're hearing it audibly. With practicing, another thing that I like to do is to practice at my worst. I've said this in some other videos, but I'll have a long day. So I'll work out in the morning. I will have gigs. I'll have calls. I'll have meetings. I'll come home. I'll make dinner with the wife, etc., etc. And then it's 9:30 10 p.m., I will then try to go and recite my hour-long speech in the mirror, and it sucks. However, I build so much confidence knowing that if I can recite the speech at my lowest when I'm drained for the entire day, that when I'm fresh the next morning and I've had breakfast and I'm talking to a group of wonderful people, I have the confidence to know that I can go out there and do a stellar job. So it's all about practicing and also practicing at your lowest. So that's my 6 steps to creating a presentation. Thinkitate on an opening story that's captivating to your audience. Establish credibility. That's about your accomplishments, your accolades, but also sometimes how you're relatable to that audience. The next thing is I take it back to college. I write out that thesis statement. I create an outline, which also doubles as my takeaways for the audience. Write the speech out verbatim. 1,000 words, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 words in my Google Docs. Every speech, I type it out verbatim. Even before I make the PowerPoint, I type everything out verbatim. And last but not least, you gotta practice the speech audibly, out loud to that invisible crowd. You gotta imagine yourself at the presentation. So that's my 6 ways that I prepare for each and every presentation.